Everybody, welcome into episode 16 of All Say This with Chris Castellani. I am your host, Chris Castellani. Thank you for tuning in today. You know, I've been thinking quite a bit about this show lately. This is my baby. This is the thing I want to be my mainstay here at Barstool. And I went off with a lot of frustration towards the end of last episode, and I don't take back any of the frustration because I truly wish that the teams in this state were better. The professional teams in the state of Michigan were better, and as a content creator, it leads to a lot of difficulty when you're talking about teams that aren't playing. Now, obviously, the Lions are out of season right now, but the Red Wings stink and weren't even close to the playoffs. The Pistons stink and weren't even close to the playoffs. I will talk about the Tigers here in a minute, but the Tigers ain't exactly competitive. But typically, I end my shows by talking about, Barstool stuff, extracurriculars. But I'm going to start this show by talking about that stuff. And we're going to start with a little cheap plug. I believe, and I've been creating content, at least on Twitter, on social media, for about 6 years now. The best piece of content that I've ever put out was my most recent reviews of all the Star Wars movies. You guys know I'm incredibly hard on myself. That was me at my best, my most confident, my least anxious, my most passionate, my most analytical, and my most fair. I really do recommend, if you listen to this podcast, regardless of whether or not you're a Star Wars fan or not, go and listen or watch that video. I know it's 40-plus minutes, but in my opinion, it's worth your time, and I don't say that lightly. I was on Money Shots on Monday. Thought it was probably my best appearance there so far. Kelly was on vacation, so it was just me and Megan. And, I've said it a million times, but I continue to be very appreciative of the way that my coworkers at Barstool have treated me. And Megan and I have a pretty good chemistry together. She finds me very amusing, which I find very humbling and very sweet, very kind person, and I thought I did a good job on that show. But let's move past that now, and we're going to jump into Detroit-based stuff, and we're going to start with something that I have never started with on this podcast: hockey. This is my pledge to the listeners and or viewers, or both, of this show / podcast. I don't know what it is. You can listen to it in either format. Starting next year, I'm going to make much more of an attempt to get into hockey. Now, I'm not saying I'm going to watch every game, but I do think this year with the Pistons, actually, even before this year, really starting in 2020 with the Pistons, I tried to make more of an attempt to get into them a little bit. I do feel a responsibility. And, hey, Detroit is called Hockey Town for a reason. So I'm going to say straight up, I'm a novice. I don't dislike hockey. I've said on this show before, I've never claimed to dislike hockey, but going forward, I'm really going to make more of an attempt to get into hockey and understand the strategy and the players. I'm not saying I'm going to be perfect, but I'm going to try. And the only way to start is with some of the news that broke. Man, when was it? I believe it was early this week. Jeff Blashill, the now former head coach of the Detroit Red Wings, was fired by Steve Yzerman after a very rough tenure in Detroit. Like I said, I'm not the biggest hockey guy. I'm a casual hockey fan. I've talked about this with the Tigers before, where when they're really good, I get into them and I watch them and I root for them. When they're not, I kind of go, whatever. I'm gonna do something else. But the Red Wings have not been very good, and Jeff Blashill did not have a high approval rating. And while I don't watch the Red Wings every night, I do read social media and I see what reliable sources have to say. And I think that when you have a team in a position like what the Red Wings were in over the last several years, and you know that they're not very good, and you know that they're struggling, and you know that, quite honestly, you could argue that they're tanking, what you look for is a coach or manager, if we're talking about baseball, with a level of self-awareness. I always use the Ron Gardenhire example where, according to wins and losses, Ron Gardenhire is probably the worst coach or manager that Detroit sports have had since the turn of the 21st century. But I think that his approval rating was relatively high because he played the game. Nobody really blamed him for the lack of success. He was good with the media, had a very jolly kind of Santa Claus-like attitude, had a very good track record dating back to when he was with Minnesota. So I think even when he retired, while most people said, yeah, he probably wasn't the right guy for the job, I think his approval rating was relatively high. Then you have somebody like Jeff Blashill, who, based on what I read, was somebody who a lot of people did not like. Did not feel like he had the right self-awareness. Strategically was not very good. And again, I gotta, I put my hand up here. I don't know. Maybe he was. I'm only basing this on what smart hockey people that I know have said. I'm really trying here, but the one thing I know for sure, he's no longer the coach of the Detroit Red Wings. And I think looking at other sports that I've watched, this is only natural, where you have the guy who transitions you, I don't know why I broke that up into so many syllables, transitions you into the next era of that team. Ron Gardenhire to A.J. Hinch. These were different circumstances, but Rick Carlisle to Larry Brown. You see it all the time. You saw it with Rick Renteria multiple times, where the Cubs were rebuilding. They fire Rick Renteria, hire Joe Madden a few years later. After Renteria is the manager for the White Sox, they let go of him, and they hired La Russa for some reason, but that's a point for another day. You see this in sports all the time. I saw a few tweets that said that they believe Jeff Blashill is a good guy, and I don't know much about him. Maybe that is the case, but it's very clear based on what I read from the Red Wings fan base and based on what I saw from reliable sources on Detroit sports Twitter, this was the right move. And the one thing I do know about the Red Wings right now is that this is a substantially more appealing job. I think it's one of the reasons why they held on to Blashill as long as they did. This is a substantially more appealing job than it would have been 3-4 years ago. You have Seider, and you have Larkin, and you have Raymond. You have a young core here, along with a guy that many people believe is the best GM in hockey, in Steve Yzerman, that can build this thing up relatively quickly. I don't want to sound too pompous, especially as someone who's not a massive hockey fan, but this is the Detroit Red Wings. Okay? I feel like Brady Hoke here. This is Michigan, for God's sakes. But this is arguably the most storied franchise in the history of professional hockey. People will walk to Detroit to coach the Detroit Red Wings. So from that aspect, I agree completely with this decision by Steve Yzerman to move on to a new coach. All right, moving on. And I've watched the last few shows, and I know that I've been a bit of a grump. I think I'm probably like an 85-year-old in a 26-year-old's body. Like, I'm a boomer without actually, like, generationally being a boomer. But we're going to move on. Frankie Collins, formerly of Michigan basketball fame, announced that he is transferring to Arizona State, basketball powerhouse Arizona State, who I don't know if they've won a college basketball tournament game in my lifetime. That's hyperbole. I know they have, but he's decided he's going to ASU, and the only reason why I'm bringing this up is that Michigan plays a tournament at the Barclays Center next November, and it's very possible that they may end up playing Arizona State, and if that's the case, I hope Michigan beats them by 30. And that's not necessarily a knock on Frankie Collins, who I think will be a good college basketball player, but I think that in the age of NIL, and in the age of the transfer portal, I am open, and I've been very much on record with this. I'm very much open with, hey, if you want to leave, if you want to change to a better situation, go ahead. Now, I'll say it straight up. I don't believe that Arizona State is a better situation than Michigan, right? It worked out so well for Josh Christopher, right? But let's leave that out for a second. I don't believe it is. But if you want to go to a place that you feel like is better for you, it is closer to home. For Frankie Collins, a guy who also played for 3 different high schools. Have at it. Enjoy it, buddy boy. That doesn't mean I got to root for you. So I hope Michigan beats them by quite a bit when they play them. I'm not trying to demean the guy. I don't want bad things to happen to him. I don't want him to get injured. I don't know much about him, so I'm going to assume he's a wonderful human being, and I hope he's very successful. But I also hope Michigan plays Arizona State next November, and I hope they beat them by quite a bit. So we're going to move on from that, and I want to talk about some comments that Hunter Dickinson made over, I think it was earlier this week, talking about NIL. And I feel bad because I've discussed NIL here before, but it's kind of like bringing it back to Star Wars. Sith. Because people say Sith. This guy's a Sith Lord. And Star Wars never really explained what a Sith is. Now, like, if you do enough, deductive reasoning and you break it down, it means it's the opposite of a Jedi. It's an evil Jedi. But NIL is name, image, likeness. It means that you are able to make money off of your name and your brand as an individual. I think it's something that's so important for college basketball. But Hunter Dickinson was very outspoken this week. I believe it was on Sam Webb's show, and I apologize if I don't know it off the top of my head. Let me double check. I'm going to make a quick edit and make sure that I get it right, because I don't want to, not cite my sources. Yes, this is what I thought. It was on WTKA radio in Michigan, and he made a statement talking about NIL. Now, this is strange, because Hunter Dickinson has also stated that one of the reasons why he's decided to come back to Michigan was because of the NIL deals that he's had. I don't know if you follow Hunter Dickinson on Instagram, but he's had a lot of sponsorships, and he's advertising, and he's making money, and good for him, man. And I think it's great that he's coming back to Michigan, and I'll talk a little bit more about Hunter Dickinson's potential legacy here in a second, but he made some statements that were very profound. He was talking about NIL, and he spoke negatively about it, at least as it regards to how Michigan has handled it. And he says, and quote, "They're going to lose out on so many players," they being Michigan, "if they don't start stepping up to the plate. I feel bad for Coach Juwan and Coach Harbaugh because they're trying. It's not their fault. The coaches are trying for sure." I'm going to stick up for Hunter Dickinson here, and it's not just because I like him as a person and as a player, but I think that there's this misconception right now that because NIL exists, hey, that's it for college players. That's it for college sports. Everything is fixed. These people who have been, living on the poverty line for years now all of a sudden have things going for them, and programs have everything going for them, and they can get whoever they want to get. That's not the case. Just because it's an improved system does not mean that it's a perfect system. And people like Hunter Dickinson are going to ultimately be remembered very well because they spoke up about their frustrations with the current system. Well, it has improved, and I think when we talk about Michigan, where this stems from, and it was well documented that now former President Mark Schlissel was not a fan of NIL. He was not a fan of athletes making money off of their image. Now, one thing that Mark Schlissel was a fan of was using his work email to act like a pervert, so his opinion doesn't really matter. And that's not me making a claim. That's truth. He's since been fired by the university, and I do believe that a new president will come in and will encourage NIL. Obviously, Hunter is frustrated because Hunter's a very competitive guy. He wants Michigan to be successful. He wants Michigan to bring in the best players possible. I don't believe, could be wrong, that Michigan missing out on Terrence Shannon was necessarily an NIL thing. They talk about admissions. They talk about Texas Tech's coach getting a little bit butthurt. I'm not going to go into that because I'm not smart enough. What I do think will happen with Michigan, and this is sad and frustrating, because I do believe that there's going to end up being some parallels to the Detroit Tigers here, and that drives me nuts. Because Michigan, and I know there's going to be people who are going to pound their fists and say, no, it's not, no, it's not, no, it's not. Yes, it is. Michigan University is a national brand. You understand they went about a decade with a terrible football program, and from a national standpoint, nobody cared because they brought in viewership and revenue. That's always going to be the case for Michigan. I think what frustrates people like Hunter Dickinson is that Michigan is a national brand. But in the age of NIL, what's going to make some people frustrated is whether or not that national brand will pump national brand money into name, image, and likeness. And this is where I'm actually going to compliment Michigan State, because I believe Mark D'Antonio is the best coach in the history of Michigan State football. I believe that Mark D'Antonio's heights will be greater than Mel Tucker. And I already imagine people who want to assassinate me for saying that, but I'm just, he won 3 Big Ten titles. He was amazing. But the one thing that Mark D'Antonio did not have was the backing by the university to be able to create the resources to be successful for the long term. It always felt like it was an uphill battle. And now with guys like Matt Ishbia and these multiple millionaires slash potential billionaires who are pumping money into the program, it's going to create opportunities for better facilities. It's going to create opportunities for guys to make money off of name, image, and likeness. And I think that's going to bother some people because they're going to say, oh man, the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. I don't buy into that because you see it with baseball all the time, where people are like, this isn't fair, there's no salary cap, and yet the Rays win 95 games of the year. It's not fair, only certain teams are allowed to spend certain money, and yet the Royals won the World Series in 2015. I think that's the landscape that college sports are going in, at least as it pertains to college football and college basketball, the big revenue-sharing sports. There is always going to be a way for certain teams, or in this case, certain programs, to be successful. Will it be something that will last in the long term? Maybe not, but teams with good coaches and good players will always be successful. The cream will always rise to the top, as frustrating as it may be. Maybe this segment sucks, but I don't know, maybe. I think I got it out for the most part. We're going to move on to something I'm a bit more knowledgeable about, sadly. And that's Tigers baseball. I laugh to hide my pain here. The Tigers stink. I don't know what else to say. The Tigers are currently 8-16 on the season. As of the time of this recording, they got 3 more games on this mini road trip against the Houston Astros, who are way better than the Tigers are. And regardless of whether or not they turn it around, Detroit is reaching a point where people are going to simply stop caring. I will defend the Tigers from this aspect. And I've done it before, and I sound like a broken record, and I don't mean to be a cheerleader. I believe in the personnel. Now, I actually, in the last few weeks, have had disagreements with some of the moves A.J. Hinch has made. Akil Baddoo is not good right now. He shouldn't be batting leadoff. He was last night. I disagree with that, but you know what? That's only half the battle when it comes to a manager. A.J. Hinch has created a good culture. I think that for the most part, the lineups have been good. The pitching changes have been good. The least of this team's problems are A.J. Hinch. I love Chris Fetter, and when you look at the job the bullpen has done, it's been pretty remarkable. They have kept this team in a lot of games, and they've won this team several games. If not for the bullpen, taking guys who were, paint salesmen a year ago, putting them, onto the mound in meaningful innings, this team would be 3-21. I mean, I think it's pretty remarkable what they've been able to do with table scraps coming out of the pen. And obviously, some of those guys are legitimately good. Like Falmer's been brilliant, but Jacob Barnes, Drew Hutchinson, that's pretty remarkable, right? What Fett's been able to do with them. And I have said, and have been on record with saying, that the offense at some point will turn it around. And you know what? As angry as I am right now, they just lost in a walk-off to the Houston Astros. I still believe that. Jonathan Scope has been a good major league player basically every year since 2016, and he's still relatively young, and I believe in his early 30s. I have a hard time believing that he won't have some sort of turnaround, and he looks awful. He looks awful right now. Hinch sat him yesterday for Harold Castro, but I do believe there will be some sort of stride that is hit with these guys. But here's the problem. Let's say, best case scenario, Jamer hits his stride, and he had a huge home run last night. Let's say that Scope hits his stride, and Baddoo finds a way to battle back, and Torkelson starts to come into his own as a rookie. You're still looking at an average offense. And this is where I get very, very frustrated with the front office. It's where I get very frustrated with player development and scouting. 6 years into the rebuild, and I know I've had some fun with this, though it's not really fun. It's just, me trying to save myself from myself. But 6 years into the rebuild, you got to be putting out an offense that is not so-so. That's really good. This is where I'm coming to the defense of Detroit sports fans 100 times out of 100, because I give Avila credit for one thing. When they pressed the reset button in the middle of the 2017 season, they promised, you know what, this is going to be there's going to be tough sledding here for the next several years, but we're going to come out of this with some studs. Okay, you know what? That's what Houston did. Houston went through a awful. Like, oh my God. They were worse than like the Tigers are right now. Like, they were so bad for a minute. And they came out of that with Keuchel, Bregman, Altuve, Springer, Correa. Ultimately, they traded for guys like Verlander and signed guys like Brantley. But for the most part, like a lot of those guys were homegrown, and it led to a championship it was a tainted championship, but a championship nonetheless. And they've had teams year in and year out since 2015 that are competing for the playoffs, and beyond that, probably competing for the World Series. So you're going to rebuild, you're going to hit reset, and you are promising us some legitimate studs. All right, that's fine. Blue Jays have done it. The Cubs did it, with Theo Epstein. And right now, what you have to show for it, truthfully, are Green and Torkelson. And I think that the Tigers organization, and this is where I do get frustrated, because I think Spencer Torkelson is going to be very good. He doesn't look good right now, but I think part of that is that there is more pressure on Spencer Torkelson at this current instant than maybe any prospect in baseball since Steven Strasburg back in 2010. Because it's completely unfair to this guy who is 2 years removed from college, who missed at least part of a season of minor league ball because of the COVID stuff, that the organization says, all right, yeah, you know what? This lineup stinks, but you're the guy. That's not fair to him. And it's why I feel bad for Riley Green, too, because I get a lot of tweets. Don't worry about Badu because Green's going to take his spot. Don't worry about Derek Hill because Green's going to take his spot. And in my heart of hearts, I believe that Riley Green is the single best Detroit Tigers prospect of the last 30 years. Riley Green hasn't swung a single bat at the major league level. You think he's going to come up here off of a broken foot and start hitting like Juan Soto? That ain't how it works, buddy boy. That's a 1 in a million chance that it happens. And if it does, I will be grinning from ear to ear. That's not how it works. I think the organization, in certain ways, I think they've handled the pitchers well, but I think they have treated these guys incredibly unfairly, that the second they get to the major leagues, they're like, hey, you're the guy. I'll give you a prime example. Alex Bregman, when A.J. Hinch was his manager back in 2016, got off to an awful start at the major league level. And people said, dude, what's this guy's deal? Like, he was a number 2 overall pick, and everyone thought he was going to be a stud. He does not look very good right now. The problem is, who else was in that lineup? Springer, Altuve, Correa. They had some players. You are relying on these guys to not be good but great, and I think that's unfair. I think that puts an unnecessary amount of pressure on them to perform. And bringing it back around here, the point I'm trying to make is that this deep post-rebuild, this deep into this whole ridiculous tornado of bullshit that we've had to go through, the lineup needs to be better. There are players I like in this lineup. I like Meadows, like Baez. Do you think Jamer will turn it around? Scope, we'll see, but that's not enough to sell people on this team right now. And I think it's remarkably unfair to the young guys. And beyond that, because those guys are getting paid still, I think it's remarkably unfair to the fans. I'm still not ruling out the fact that this team can have some sort of turnaround. This is not a playoff team. And I predicted they wouldn't be. By the way, like, people say, you said the Tigers were going to be great. No, I didn't. Maybe you should watch the fucking show. But I never said any of that. I said that I thought they would be good and they would play meaningful baseball deep into the season. I'm redacting that comment right now. They're 8-16. They're having trouble putting a baseball in play in this moment. So yeah, I'm taking that back and saying that was a bad take. But even if they have some sort of turnaround and this becomes a 500, somewhat below 500 team like they were a year ago, does it not feel like pulling teeth? Does it not feel like every inning is an exercise? Does it not feel like every at-bat is a head-scratcher at this point? And when we are 6 years into the rebuild, you're not wrong for feeling that way right now, because I look at teams that started their rebuilds or hit the reset button a while back, or even teams that didn't. Like, the amount of teams that were bad when the Tigers hit reset that are now not just good but great is pretty staggering. The Mets look awesome. The Blue Jays are excellent. The White Sox are going to be fine. The Twins have been competitive. The Guardians, who've traded away potential Hall of Famers, Cy Young winners, All-Stars over the last 4 or 5 years, they're still hanging in there. They still got pitchers. it just feels so tedious what the Tigers are going through right now, and it's why I cannot begrudge any fan who feels an exceptional amount of frustration at this point. I'm very disheartened. I'm very disheartened by what I've seen, and this could get worse. Everyone is asking me about this. I'm not going to talk about it yet, but yeah, EJ Hinch, that contract, it'll be a thing. It'll be a thing if this team continues to play like they've played. If they continue to lose 2/3 of their games, it's something I'll talk about and entertain later. I'm not there yet. We're too early into the season, but I can't begrudge any fan who feels betrayed by how poorly this team has played so far this year. This is why I like doing Barstool stuff, because Barstool stuff gets me away from the awfulness that is Detroit sports. Like when I'm on the dozen, even when we lose, I get to answer some trivia questions, get some good laughs, get to see my coworkers who are beautiful and lovely people who have been so kind to me when I'm on Money Shots, and I get to hang out with Megan and Kelly. And, you know, even if my predictions are wrong, and they find me amusing and they laugh, and I come out of it feeling good about myself. When I end this show, I'm just like, oh, God. And I got to tell the truth, right? But outside of Michigan and Michigan State being successful, because those teams are good, right? I mean, I know I'm not a Michigan State fan, but at least those teams are successful. Outside of that, you're going through a whole lot of mud. Watch my Star Wars video. That video was good. Other than that, and this show was good. I'm not knocking this show, but oy vey. The first team that gets to the playoffs in Detroit is going to be worshipped. Not necessarily because they were great, but because they were a little bit different. All right, so that'll do it for today's show. You can follow me on Twitter at Castellani2014. While you're at it, if you're watching this on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Let's get those watch hours up. Thank you very much for watching, everybody. We're going to get through this. We are. Some way, shape, or form. In the show, I know I let off with this. This show is going to change form at some point, because I'll admit I've been struggling a little bit with where to take this thing, because I want this show to represent Michigan-based sports, Detroit professional sports, but I also want it to be a bit of a Chris Castellani show. And I'm asking the people in the comments right now, and I don't believe that you can really provide that on Spotify or Apple Podcasts necessarily, but on YouTube, let me know what kind of show you want this to be. Because the segment in which I talked about being on the autism spectrum, I appreciated, but I don't know how well the average Barstool Sports follower appreciates that. I'm very torn on the direction to take this podcast. I have full faith in my personnel. Producer Matt's done an amazing job, but yeah, I'd be lying if I'm not a little bit frustrated, because talking about this nonsense every single week, twice a week, it's not the best for you. So we'll see where it goes. But let us know what direction you want this show to go in, because I want to do what's best for you, because what's best for the fans is what's best for me and what's best for Barstool. So I really appreciate all of you watching. I don't mean to end this on a depressing note. I don't believe it's a depressing note, just an honest note. So thank you very much, everybody. Have a great rest of your day. Have a great weekend. Peace and happiness.